Hi guys, Réal Laplaine back again. I am going to read portions of my books to, if you're interested in hearing them, because I've never done this before. I've never sat and actually just recorded myself reading my books, but it was suggested to me by people that would be interesting to them. So I'm going to take the next book I'm going to read from is called The Buffalo Kid. Now, The Buffalo Kid is actually the first book I published a little over 10 years ago. Also one of my most popular books, and also has garnered tremendously good reviews because it's a story that everybody can relate to. In a nutshell, it's a story about a 71-year-old man who's been living on the streets of Buffalo, New York, and so because he's the oldest homeless person in Buffalo, people have come to call him the Buffalo Kid. But he wasn't always homeless. The last 31 years of his life he spent on the streets, living in a cardboard box under the Niagara Bridge. Before that, he was a relatively successful businessman working. He had a wife, and he had two newborns. But for reasons which are explained in the book, he ends up going bankrupt. His wife leaves him, takes the kids, and he ends up on the streets penniless, and has been there for 31 years. And the story picks up at the point when he encounters a second chance to change his life. And what happens and what ensues in this very odd encounter is a story that really inspires. I mean, it's very heartwarming, right to the end. And everyone who's read the book, or many who have read the book, have commented on how they could relate to it because, well, everybody, the Buffalo Kid could be anybody. It could be a member of your family. It could be a friend. It could be an associate. In America, when I was living there and I wrote the book, having lived in Los Angeles before I moved up to Buffalo, Los Angeles, I think there's roughly 100,000 homeless people living on the streets. 100,000 people. I used to stop and talk to them at times, and I found it very interesting that these were not criminals or drug addicts. A lot of them had fallen into alcoholism and drugs and stuff like that, but they had normal lives, and at some point the road that they traveled, it broke. They digress, and they ended up on the streets. And they're tragic stories, but there are some inspiring stories behind that of people who actually got off the streets eventually. And I decided that The Buffalo Kid would be one of those. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you pick up the book and read it. But I'm going to read from the first chapter. It's the opening when the Buffalo Kid himself is monologuing. And so here we go. Buffalo, New York, my town for the past 7 decades, has not always been this way. Ask anyone who has lived here for a while. I mean, 20 or 30 years while, not some Johnny come lately. Those of us who have been here for most of or all of our lives will tell you about a once thriving city full of industry and commerce. The days when the streets were lined with beautiful homes built in the great American architectural style from before the turn of the 20th century. Structures of fabulous artwork that have never since been repeated and possibly never will. Buffalo was alive in those days. You could feel it, sense it. It was a growing, animated, and thriving metropolis. I know because I was there, and I still am, only now my circumstances have drastically changed. I have walked more streets of Buffalo and spent more time on them than most any human being alive today. Why, you may ask? I was a homeless man for over 30 years of my life. I was not always destitute and abandoned to the streets. I once had a good life, a family, 2 new babies whom I loved, and a wife who, well, God bless her tortured soul, turned out to be a turncoat who walked out the door and abandoned me when the chips were down. I'm not pointing any fingers. Blame is for losers. It is a sign of weakness in humanity. When we blame others for our situation in life, we deprive ourselves of the power to do anything about it. And believe me, blame was a crutch I could easily have resorted to. Losers point fingers at others. That is a lesson I learned the hard way. And had it not been for the dynamics which were set in play in the story you were about to read, I would still be on those streets, bumming around for handouts, picking up cigarette butts, and living in a cardboard box. There you go. Short portion from chapter 1. So again, The Buffalo Kid, it's an inspiring story, and it is inspired actually by people I met and spoke to between Los Angeles and Buffalo, where I lived. And it's a story about hope. It's a story about second chances, and it was written to inspire people to when you see that person on the street and they're asking you for money, or they're crouched in some alleyway. The story gives you a different perspective about them and the lives they led or possibly led. So there you go, The Buffalo Kid. Check it out.